So as Paul mentioned, Paul and I have been doing this Notes and Domino thing, if you want to call it that, for quite a while. And we were instructors when Release 4 came out with FloaterScript, and that was, I would say, for both of us, probably our first big introduction into an object-oriented programming language. So, like many of you, I think, you probably started with Notes and kind of then started working with FloaterScript, which, and many of us, when we worked with FloaterScript, started using the object-oriented capabilities of FloaterScript. And even if you didn't consciously do that, you probably use the object-oriented just whenever you access the Domino objects, if those are just objects. Some of you who have not really tried out Java in Domino might not even remember or be aware that Java has been in Domino since R5. And so I have used Java agents and web services, and then with XPages I've done a lot more Java, but I haven't really done, I would say, what I would call a production managed bean, where I actually created a managed bean that I actually put into production. I kind of played around with it, but not really did anything serious, I guess you could say. So I think that a lot of you have a similar background. Hopefully you have a little bit of introduction to object-oriented programming, at least in LotusScript. And because that's kind of what I'm basing the audience at, and based on my conversations with many people over the years, I think a lot of people, are kind of at that LotusScript level. So let's get started. And so what I'm going to take you on today in my journey, my first project was our TLCC catalog that many of you have probably seen. And rather than see a slide, let me just jump right into what it looks like. This is actually the old version before using a managed bean, and it looks exactly like the one today that uses a managed bean, because what we really changed was just under the covers. So let me explain a little bit how this works and why I wanted to improve upon it and move to a managed bean. First of all, you can select on the left side what version of Domino you want to find courses for, and that will reload the courses that you see. That also will reload what topics you see here, because not every version, like if we go down to 8.0, there's no XPages in 8.0, so we have a different set of courses, and the old DB2 feature is gone. That was last seen in 8.0. So we have to reset this list of what I'm going to call categories for today's discussion. So this list of categories of courses we have to reset whenever we change a version or change whether you want to see developer, admin, or all courses. So then if you want to drill down further, and let's say you want to see the LotusScript courses, then we have to again reset what you're looking at in the middle that shows all the information about the courses is all done in a repeat and repeating table rows. So the repeat control has to then calculate again what courses to show. And so I wasn't very happy with the way I did it, which let me take, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to give you a rough idea of what we were doing before. So everything, all the courses, of course, being Domino developers, and all our site is driven by Domino, and all our courses are in a Domino database. And so, of course, we have a Domino view. This is in the order that I want to show the courses to the person viewing our web page. So what I do in the old version of the XPage was the repeat would figure out, okay, what courses do we want to see, and then loads them up into the repeat, kind of going through them one by one. So this is our view, and so in the new version with the managed bean, I'm going to still use the same view, but I'm just going to use it, as I explain later, to initially load a bean, and then from that point on, we won't access the Domino view anymore. Okay, so the XPage itself, as you can see, here it is in Designer, and what I did For the version, it's actually just hard-coded, just to make it easier back then. I just hard-coded that, as well as the admin and developer. When we first load the XPage, we have a function we call in Server Side JavaScript in the library that I also call whenever I change versions. And so what I did to get all those categories, they can be either developer categories or admin categories or both. I just set up a session scope variable. So I went to a view and basically walked through the view entry by entry and created an array that I loaded into a session scope variable for the admin courses, and did the same thing for the developer courses. And then for all the courses, I just concatenated those together into another session scope variable. So that happens whenever we change versions. That's a fairly processing intensive task. Then whenever the user, the list of, I should say, the list of categories that they see is just going to load from those session scope variables. So we have, in this case, it's like a combo box. It's a Dojo filtering select control. And it's just going to load the choices depending on what the user selected. If they selected developer or admin or both, it'll just load the sessions from the categories, I should say, from those session scope variables. So nothing too complicated there. But then in my repeat control, that's repeating the table rows, I have a fair amount of code that, depending on what the user selected on the left side, is going to go through a view and one by one load up what should be in the repeat into an array list. So I initialize an empty array list, and depending on what the user wants to see, we're going to loop through one by one, adding to that array list. So every time the user changes something on the left side, it's a fairly processor-intensive task to go to the domino view and figure out what to show. And if they select a category, then we do, I think down here, a full-text search. And then the results of that full-text search we load into that array list to show, the courses. So that was a fairly time-consuming process. It actually, believe it or not, if you go to, well, it's hard for you to go to their website now, so you're just going to see the new version. But as you see, it's hard to tell what the delay is when you go to GoToWebinar, but it actually does happen pretty quickly. I think that's something to be said of the people at IBM who developed XPages. It is a very fast-performing website, even when you do some kludgy programming like I was doing. So anyway, that's just the way it worked before. So really what I wanted to do was to improve the performance. I wanted to avoid accessing any domino views whenever the user changed something. I wanted to load it all from memory using a Java Bean to control what courses get displayed. So that's one of the goals. The other goal was a lot of the pieces before were kind of interconnected, and if I wanted to take the catalog and then come up with a mobile design, maybe move to the X controls or move to a bootstrap layout, it would be a lot of work to kind of duplicate a lot of the processes and a lot of the things I had to make everything work. Now with the Java Bean, it's really a piece of cake to go to a different environment, because I greatly simplified how the Bean interacts with the XPage to get the right courses and the right categories and things like that. Okay, so I kind of knew I wanted to do a managed Bean, and the idea was to kind of just load everything from memory. That obviously you don't want to do that when you have a catalog of 10,000 things. I mean, we have, probably 100 courses that I'd be wanting to put into memory. So that's not too, very memory intensive at all. But, keep in mind that the idea of using the managed Bean is that you want to have something that interacts, in my case, to load from memory. Now, of course, your managed Bean might be different. Maybe your managed Bean is just then going to go off and pull data in from a Domino document or pull in information from a relational database or whatever, and then it might perform that work of pulling the information in at the time you access the bean. But as I said, in my case, my goal was to have everything memory resident to speed things up. I also wanted to make it a little more less hard coding. So for the different types of courses, I pull all that in from the bean as opposed to just hard coding in admin or developer. So if we wanted to add another type of course, we could do that and not change any code, and figure out what categories exist for each version as well. Then when it comes down to getting the courses, I want to pass to my repeat a collection of courses for, I have a number of different cases when I want to get all the courses for a specific version, or maybe just a developer courses for a specific version, or maybe I want to actually get the XPages courses for Domino 9 and drill down that way. So I want to be able to return back to the repeat just by calling the manage bean and have it return all the courses, a collection of all the courses that I need. And then for each course, I need to be able to provide the information such as a name and a price and a quick description and some other basic information. So just kind of a reminder, I'm not actually trying to duplicate the entire catalog page. What we do is the user clicks on the title of the course and they can go to another page that actually loads from a Domino view and has rich text and graphics and stuff like that. This is strictly the actual page that you see with the listing of courses. Okay, so let me get into a little bit of just definitions. We covered this actually in the December webinar with Mike McArrow and Graham Akers, but I'll repeat it here quickly. And that's also what Graham and Mike did was another way of approaching a managed bean, and the way they created one for, in their case, a shopping cart. So if you get a chance and you didn't see that webinar on December, I put the link in the chat. You can access it there. It's available on our website. So the definition of a managed bean is just a Java class that will use what we call getter and setter methods to access the property elements. Typically, the Java bean is going to have many different objects, and you're just going to provide some common interfaces to make it easy to access the information in those objects. So to be considered a bean, what we're going to have is all our variables that we're going to store our data in. We're going to define those as private, and those are called properties or fields. And then we're going to create methods that are public. They're accessible from anyone using the bean that start with get or set. So we use the, let's say you want to access the name, we would say get name. If we want to set the value of that name variable, we would say set name. And then we use is for a Boolean value. So all our Java beans are going to have gets and sets to interface with the data. Also, then your class has to implement the serializable interface to be considered a bean. And this is important for XPages because XPages will stay resident in memory, but the XPages engine, if memory starts getting full or the user has too many sessions, it will move them to disk. And when they're moved to disk, then they need to be serializable, meaning they can be written out to disk. Because of that, that's one thing you don't ever want to do is put any sort of Domino object. You don't want to store it in a bean. You can access your Domino objects, get the information, store them in your bean, but you don't actually put a Domino document and store it in the bean and expect it to be there if the bean were to get written out to disk or the XPage were to get written out to disk. The same is true with your scope variables. I know some people have ran across that. They try to store a Domino document in a session scope variable. That's not going to work. So you can store information from the document, but you can't store any Domino object into any sort of scope variable or bean. So just a pointer there. Okay, so here's a picture of a sample bean, a simple one. So we define our name of our class, demo bean 322. implements serializable. So that's the requirement I was talking about, that it has to implement the serializable interface. And when you have something that's serializable, you have to give it an ID, which is what the serial version UID is. I'll show you how to create that in Eclipse very simply. Then we have our actual variables on lines 9, 10, and 11, first name, last name, DB title. These are marked private, so when you access this bean, you can't get to just first name by itself. So how do we get to it? We use the getter on line 13, get first name, and inside that method, it just returns the first name variable. If we need to set that value, we use a setter, and that obviously does the same thing, sets the whatever parameter we passed into that variable. So that's the public getters and setters I was talking about. These are the private properties. So that's the kind of a way the bean gets laid out. So now what's a managed bean? So what I just talked about was a Java bean. A managed bean is a Java bean that we're going to define in what they call the runtime framework. The reason I didn't say define it in Domino is because Domino XPages are built on the Java Server Faces engine, and that's present in other Java application servers like Apache Tomcat or WebSphere. So those environments probably have their way to register a managed bean. In XPages, we're going to register the managed bean in the Faces config file. Once we do that and we access our XPage in that application, we're going to then use the getter and setter methods to call the bean. So we don't have to actually instantiate an object variable for the bean. We just can use, let's say, in the previous slide, my bean was called, well, it depends on the name in the Faces config file, but let's say we called it demo bean 322 in the Faces config as well. We would just call it demo bean 322.get first name, and that will return the first name value. The other than that, the Java bean and the managed bean are exactly the same. And you don't always need to use a managed bean. The idea of a managed bean is that the management of that bean is handled by the XPages engine, and that will initialize it and follow whatever scope you gave it. So you can give it an application scope, a session scope, your view scope, or request scope. Any of the scopes that we can use for the session or the scope variables, we can define for the managed bean as well. And so it's a lot less work for you, and if you give it something like a session scope, then it will be for that user for the life of the session, and that bean will exist. And you don't have to worry about initializing it or instantiating it. It'll just be there. But lots of times we just need to call some Java to do something, and then we don't need to access it again or to save any data in the bean. And so in that case, don't use a managed bean. Just use a regular Java bean and instantiate the Java bean, get a variable for the bean, and then do whatever you have to do for processing, and then you're done with it. Okay, so getting back to my specific project, I kind of listed out some of the objects I thought I would need to pull this off, and I have it on a slide, but it actually probably took a day or two of thinking, and as I was thinking, I was researching on some of the Java documentation online, trying to figure out, okay, obviously I need to start off with a object to hold the course, and that's going to hold some details about the course, like the name, the price, course code, description. But then I somehow need to have a grouping of courses that would be part of, let's say, the XPages courses for release 9. And those XPages courses are, be something that a developer wants to see. So I need to then kind of compartmentalize a group of courses. So I figured I needed a course list object to hold a group of courses that are related to each other. Then I I was thinking, okay, now I have a number of different categories. So for developer courses, I might have XPages, Java, and LotusScript. So for each one of those categories, I want to assign it the course list that holds the courses for that category. So that was the category table that I was thinking I might need to hold my categories and be able to pull in, okay, give me all the XPages courses in this categories table, and then give me then a collection of the courses that are in that category. Then moving up, my categories are either developer categories or admin categories. So I needed to have another table, a type table, that holds a categories table for the categories for that type. So I might have a developer type table, and in that developer type table, it would hold a categories table that has all my categories. And then finally above that, I have a version table that holds a type table for each version. And so as you can see, there's quite a hierarchy. And so for today's discussion, let's forget about versions. We just got one version, version 9, and just to kind of make it a little easier for you guys. Because one thing I will point out is once you start coding and you're starting to think about where to put things and how to access things, I had this kind of sketched out on paper, and that really helps a lot to be able to, okay, let's stop for a second, look at my scrap paper, and how does everything relate to each other, and what exactly is it? Because you kind of sometimes get to that point where you kind of get a little lost in your own plans, I guess you could say, and then being able to look at that paper and level set and say, oh yeah, this is what I'm trying to do, and this is what I'm trying to get, helps a lot. So sketching it out on paper is good. Definitely want to think about this before you start writing any code at all. So for my, just to kind of look at it another way in terms of graphically, starting off with a course, so each course has a name, price, description. We're going to put a group of courses in a course list, which I decided would be an array list. Array lists are good because you can feed those into a repeat very easily and then have it repeat through whatever is in that array list. So my course list object has an array list that holds my courses, and then that course list object I put into a category table, and the category table I decided to use a linked HashMap Java object. The reason I did that is because those can have a key value pair. So I can say, give me all the XPages courses, and the value will be the courses list for that XPages category. So it makes it easy then to get a certain category by using the key, and it will return the value. And again, the value would be a courses list of courses. And then the category table, once I built that up for, let's say, all the developer courses, I put that into a type table. Again, a linked HashMap. So I can say, give me all the developer courses. It will return the one category table that has all my categories, that holds all the courses and so forth down the line. So well, what we're going to do is kind of start coding that, and I'm going to walk through the code and be brave and code live. But let me first describe one way that I initially did this. And so I'm sure many of you, I think everyone knows Domino Designer is built on Eclipse. But Eclipse is, and originally was, a Java development platform. So that is all still there. And the way you can access it is go to the Java perspective. So why am I telling you this? Well, if I were to start creating my managed bean in XPages, I would have to define the Java class. That's pretty easy now, especially in Domino 9. They have a Java design element. But I would have to then set up my managed bean in my Faces config file. Not a big deal. But then whenever I wanted to interface with that managed bean, I'd have to go to an XPage and create the linkages to the managed bean. It would kind of make it a lot harder to do my prototyping. So I figured that if I used a Java program that stands on its own, and Java programs have what's called a main method, we'll see that in a second, that I can then use to create some test cases, and I can create all my objects and create the relationships between them and use the Java program, which I can then just output things to the system console. So let's go look at that as I said, this is kind of what I did my prototyping on. So to access the Java perspective, you got to go to Window, Open Perspective, Java. And then you're going to get on the left side our Package Explorer, Hierarchy, and Navigator. So I'm going to stay in the Navigator, and I'm going to create a new Java project. So you don't get that new Java project if you're in any of the Domino Designer perspectives. So that's why I switched over. So I'll create a new Java project. I'll call it Test Webinar, and I'll take all the defaults and just click Finish. So here is my new Java project. We got two folders that are empty. One's for source code, and in that source code folder, I'm going to right-click on that and say New Package. It's good to put all your Java classes in a package, and it's typically we use reverse DNS. So I'll put in com.tlcc to create a package. So a package is in the Navigator, just looks like another subfolder underneath my source. Okay, now I want to create a new Java class. So I'll go to Class, and I'll call this Catalog Bean. So this is the start of my bean. Now, as I said, I want to be able to do my testing and run this as a Java program. To do that, I need to have the main method stub, so I'll click that on. So we'll create the, you'll see that in a second. It'll create an empty class, and in my main, this is what initially runs when I run my Java program. And up here is where I can put or build out, start building out my Java class, or my Java bean, I should say. So first we got to follow the rules. Any Java bean should implement the serializable. So I'll type in implements. I only have to type in IMP and hit Control Space. It'll fill that in for me. And then I can do Control Space again. I can type in serializable, SER, hit Control Space, get a list of options. I want the java.io one, so I'll double click on that. That will automatically add in the import I need, and will also give me a warning. So if you notice in the left side here, I have a little warning that says I don't have the ID that I mentioned before that we need. So I can just click on that warning, and I can say add the default serial version ID, double click on that, and it sticks in, get rid of these comments here, it sticks in the ID that's required to make it a proper Java bean. Okay, so the next thing I needed to do after this was, remember I said the course is the nucleus, I guess you could say, of all my data. So I'll create a class for my course. Now this is something I'm going to access in the repeat in my XPage, so I'm going to make this public. You'll see the vast majority of the objects inside my Java bean I'm going to make private because they don't have a need to be accessed. What we're going to do is provide getters and setters at the end to pull in all the information, and the bean's going to access that. But as we loop through a list of courses, we need to get things like the name and stuff like that. So let me just create a it's public class course. Okay, so that's my object to hold information about a course. To avoid some typing, I'll save some time. I'll paste in my private properties. So this is where I'm going to store the data for each course in these variables. So now what I need to do is create my getters and setters. So here I could type these in. I could say public string get name. So I could create my getters and setters this way by typing them in, but Eclipse has this nice little thing that will generate it for us. If I right-click anywhere in the editor and go to Source, I can go to Generate Getters and Setters. Here are my private fields, private properties, and I can just check on each one of those to create a get and set for those 4 private variables. And we can say if they should be public or private. Down here at the bottom, I want them to be public. And those are my getters and setters that I need to get information for a course. Then the other thing I want to do is, so when I declare a new course object, I could set these one at a time. So I could, declare an empty course object, and then say set the price, set the name, set the description, set the code using those setters that were just created. But I'm going to do those all in one step. When I create a new course, I'm going to have a constructor that runs. So when I create a new course, I'll just say new course, pass in the 4 variables for the name, course code, price, and description, and that will set all the values. And that's my course object. So still got a little ways to go before we're done with the bean, but let's go ahead and try this. So first thing I want to do is create a new catalog bean object. I'll call it cbean. And again, you can use control space to save a lot of typing. And then I can create a new course just by saying course C is equal to new, cbean dot new course. And let's see, we want to pass it. Actually, rather than typing everything in, I got a little cheat sheet in Notepad. We'll just paste that in. Okay, and the last thing I'll do is test it out. So I'll test it out using a getter and using when we run a write to the console, when we run a Java program, we can just use system.out.println, and it'll be cbean. Oops, I'm sorry. It'll be course dot get name. And notice the type ahead's there for the object that I created. So it makes it nice and easy. If you don't see what you did in the type ahead, chances are you made a mistake. It's kind of my general rule. Okay, so I'll save that. I don't have any errors. I can run it by going to the run icon right underneath navigate. If you can see my cursor, I can click on that and it will run my Java program and output to the console at the bottom here the name of the course that I created. So that's my course object. So I know my course object's working, and we can take it a step further and build that course list that's going to hold a collection of courses. So let's go talk about that for a second. What I want to make this courses list variable be is I want it to hold an array list of courses. So an array list is like an array. I'm sure everyone's familiar with an array, but an array list is part of what's called the collection class in Java. The nice thing is you don't have to set a size. Normally in Java arrays you got to kind of give it an initial size. But probably the most important thing about using an array list is that there's something in Java called generics, and we can give our collection a data type that it's supposed to be. So in this case, if you look that this array list, I want to hold a course. I'll call it course list. So it can only hold a course object. It can't hold anything else, and if we try to give it something else, we'll get an error when we go to save it and compile our code. So these generics are really great for programming because you're not going to be able to, like in an array, you could then stick anything into the array, which later on could cause you problems. This way, we're always going to know that our course list is holding course objects. Once we create the array list, we can, there's a whole bunch of methods you can look up and see that's available in the ArrayList class. But one of the two that are useful for me at the moment is to add an object, so I can add a new course by saying courselist.add and pass it a course object. Or I can add all and add a collection of courses. So that's useful, which I'll use that a lot as we move forward. And as I mentioned before, that the array lists are very good in repeats because you can pass an array list to the value property of the repeat, and it'll just repeat over whatever objects are in that repeat, whether they be strings or, in this case, courses. So in my repeat, then I'll use the get name and get price, etc. To show the information in the repeat. Okay, so let's go back to our designer, and let's build another object here that's going to hold the array list of courses. So it's going to hold a grouping of courses. So I'm going to say private class courses list. Okay, and so in this class, the most important thing I want this class to do is to have an array list to hold the grouping of courses. So I will say private array list, and I'll use my control space again to pull up the array list. And notice now when I do that, it automatically sticks in the left and right angle bracket and puts an E in there. So that's the data type that's going to be in this array list. So if I put in, I want to put in the course. That's the only type of data I want to be stored in this array list. And we'll call this variable CList. Okay, so that's the, let's see. I'm getting warnings since I haven't used these variables yet. That's okay, because we're going to use them in a second. So the first thing I want to do is when we create a new courses list object, I want to initialize it. So I need to set up a constructor to initialize that array list whenever we create a new courses list. And we'll just initially set it up. It'll just be an empty array list. So I'll say CList is equal to new array list course. Again, the type ahead helps save me a lot of time. So whenever we create a new courses list, it will initialize this CList variable and make it a new empty array list. So now what we need to do is I could set up my getters and setters. However, if I go to the generate getters and setters, when we go to set it with the generated setter, it's going to expect a whole array list of courses. So I don't really want to do that. I want to add these one at a time as I build these array lists. So I'm just going to set up the getter automatically. So that created it right here. So as I mentioned, what I'm really going to do is add these one at a time, and I should have made this private. So we're never going to use this outside of our class. So what I'm really going to do is I want to add a course one at a time. So I don't need this method to return anything. I just want to add a course, and of course, no pun intended, I'm going to pass in a course object. So I need to put in that into my parameters. And then when I do that, I will go to my array list and just say clist.add and add a course, which would be that parameter that I passed in. So this is going to let me, I can call, create a new courses list, and then call, the method add course to add a course one at a time. And let's see, that should be it for now, because we want to try it out. Just get rid of some white space here. So trying it out, I'm going to need to create another course so we have more than one. So let me do that. Again, I'm going to kind of shortcut here. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay, so what I'm going to do is create two course objects, C and C2. One has our XPages 1 course, one has the XPages 2. Then I'll create a new courses list, and then I'll use that add course that I just created to add the C course. Then I'll add it again, adding the C2 course. Then I'll loop through the array list. So CL is our courses list object, and get CList returns an array list, which we can just look again here. Get CList returns an array list of courses. So we're going to loop through that array, and then when we do that, we will just call our variable as we loop through is called temp course. Temp course is a course object, and so we'll just say temp course.getName. So I'll run that as, again, Java program, and you see that it prints out course name is, with the two courses that we created. So that's my courses list. And the next thing I want to add, if we remember, is I want to put these courses list into a category table. So the category table is going to hold a number of categories. Categories, again, are like XPages, LotusScript, JavaScript, Java, and each one of those categories will have a courses list, array list associated with it, or a courses list object, I should say, associated with it. So again, I'll create a new course category table. And actually, before I do that, let's get back to let's go back to our slides. And the reason I want to come back to the slides is because the category table, I mentioned this before, is going to be a linked hash map. Why are we using a linked hash map? Well, the linked hash map will hold a key value pair, meaning that I can say, give me, in this category table, give me the XPages category, that's our key, and it will return a value. The value in this case is going to be my courses list, what we just created. The nice thing about the linked hash map is that it will maintain the insertion order. So as I loop through and initially build out the data in my Java bean, it's going to, I'm going to go through that view and add the courses one at a time to my Java bean. And I want the courses to stay in the same order as I added them, because my view is in the order that I want the users to see it in. So that's one of the reasons I chose the linked hash map. So how do I know all that stuff? Well, I went on the web, of course, and Googled it and learned about Java collections, and I'll show you in a second a couple of references that I found that kind of helped me choose what type of collection to use depending on my requirements. Okay, so the linked hash map, like many of the Java collection objects, has a put and get. So if I want to put a value into a linked hash map, I use the put, give it two parameters. One is the key. In this case, it's a string. You can have other kinds of objects. And the second parameter is my value. In this case, it's the courses list object that I just created. And then if I want to get a value, I can just say get and give it the key, and then it will return the value. Pretty simple. If I want to loop through a linked hash map, I can loop through and get all the entries. So the entries would be that key value pair, and that would be an entry object. or I can get a set of only the keys, which would be, in this case, the string of all the categories, or I can get the values, which in this case would be a set of the various courses lists that I put in there. So that can be very handy because I'm going to have to loop through these later on when I start pulling information out of the bean and passing it to my XPage. So again, how did I know to use a linked hash map? Obviously, I Googled it, I said that. But some of the considerations that you want to think of in terms of what collection you want to use. In Java collections, I should add, the collections framework in Java has dozens and dozens of different types of collections. So how do we choose one? First of all, do we want our data to be automatically sorted? So you can have a collection that has, let's say, a key value pair where the data is always sorted based on the key. And when you insert something in that's new, it will then automatically reorder everything to always keep it in the right order. So that may be important to you. Or it might be more important to maintain the insertion order, which is my case. Then another thing is, do you want it to hold a key value pair? Some of the collections, like the array list, don't have the key value pairs. And do you need duplicates? In the linked hash map, your keys obviously have to be unique. So if you do need duplicates of your data, you want to use an array list. Typically, you're going to find that you're going to use ArrayList, linked hash maps, tree maps. Those are the most common, but you never know. Another way to figure this out, this is a really neat chart I found on the web. I think one of the other folks, IBM Champions, pointed this out, these articles. We were having a conversation in a chat about Java collections. And this chart is at that first URL at the bottom of the page. At the second URL at the bottom of the page is a good article about what Java collections to use. But let's go through this for my two use cases that I've talked about already. So first of all, the courses list, we'll start at the top. And let me see if I'll even get fancy with the little tools here on PowerPoint. So we'll start at the top. And so for the list of courses, I just want that to have values only. So we'll go off to the right, and that will be the values. Will they contain duplicates? Not really in my case. We don't have duplicates of courses. That'll be a little confusing for people figuring out what course to get. So then I come down here. Do I need to remove elements or figure out if an element is in that courses list? Not really. I just want to get a list of the courses. So it points to the array list, which is what I was using. Let's go for the category table. Here we wanted a key value pair because I want to be able to say, give me all, let's say, the LotusScript courses. The order was important for me, and the order was important based on the insertion order. So I went down to the right, and it said I should use a linked hash map. So very nice chart here to help you out, figure out what collection to use, and then once you figure out the name, you just look up the Java documentation on that and figure out what to go to. Okay, so let's go back to Designer. I'm not going to, I'll build this out a little bit more, and at some point in time, I'll stop coding and just kind of show you some of the things in the completed bean to make sure we stay on time. So we wanted to build the category table here. So the category table, let me just start building it out. I say private, let's see, private class category table. And so in this, I mentioned that the primary storage, we're going to put everything in a linked hash map. Okay, and so when I use the control space, to get the type ahead. It will then I insert it in. It will put in a K for key. So my key is going to be a string. And then the value is going to be my courses list. Okay, so that's my linked hash map, and we'll call it cat table. Okay, so that's my what I'm going to store the data in my category table class. And then we want to have a constructor to initialize that. So whenever we create a new category table, we want to create, just initialize cat table as a new linked hash map, so it's empty at that point in time. Okay, I can use my getters and setters to create. Actually, I'm just going to create the getter for the same reason as before, in that the get cat table. Actually, I don't even think I want to do that as well. Let's see what it creates. Yeah, so I don't even want to do this. Where'd it go? Oh, here it is. So this is what we created. Actually, I don't even want to create that. I take that back. So what I'm going to want to do here is I want to have a couple of methods. So first of all, I might want to be able to return. I take that back. I do want that. Looking at my notes, let's put that back in. Let's see. Oh, okay, we got that there. What did I do? Okay, that's the trouble with the live demos here. I accidentally deleted my constructor. Okay. Do we have that right? No, we had our constructor. Okay, never mind. Start over again. So actually, let me here, just save time. I'll cut and paste it in. Okay, so I want to have a couple methods here. One is, let's see what my favorite errors. Okay, so what I did there is I created, let's look at this one first. So I created a get courses method that we pass it in a string, which would be the category name, and that'll use the get method on our cat table to return the list of courses, the courses list object. So that was one method I wanted. The other one was I wanted to just be able to get the category table. When I say get cat table, have it return a linked hash map that is our cat table. So if I want to get the linked hash map that has our categories with the courses list, I can do that. Okay, so let's test that out. And go back to our main and put in our test code. And what did I have? What do we have here? Our get courses returns. Okay, I think I missed one. Yes, there we go. I missed one key method. The fun of doing a live demo. Okay, so one key method that we needed to do, we didn't have any way to add a category. Okay, so obviously when I initialize this, I'm getting a empty cat table, but I need to add categories to that cat table. And so what I did was create a method called add category, where I pass in the name of my category, like XPages, and then we pass in all the XPages courses that are in a courses list variable, and we use the put method to put that member of the linked hash map in. So that should then, when I run this or test it, let's go explain what we did here. We still created our 2 courses. We're creating our course list, and we're creating a category table, and we're adding the category here, passing in our key and our category list. So that creates our cat test category table object, and we're going to loop through that by saying cat test.getCourses. That returns a courses list. GetCList returns an array list, and each member of the array list is a course, so we'll just print out the name. So that prints out the same 2 courses, but these are now coming from our category table. Okay, so some of the other things I might want to add to this category table is I might want to get all the categories. So that might be something I want to do. Let me finish this up. So I'll go back to my category table up here, and I'm going to put in 2 more methods. One is going to get all courses. So rather than have to specify a key, I just want to go through and get all the courses that are in this category table. So that's one thing I want to add. So get all courses, we'll just build an array list, and then we'll go through. Here's where we go through and loop through all the values in our cat table linked HashMap, and then we'll use the add all to add all the courses in that one category to our course array list, which we then return back when we call that. The other thing is to get all the keys. So I'm going to get all the keys or all the categories by using the key set that I mentioned before to loop through all the keys as a set, and I'll just use the add all to add them to a new array list which I return. So get all categories will return a string, an array list of strings of all my categories, and get all courses will return an array list of course objects. So let's just test that out. So really all the code in my main object is the same except my for loop. Instead of that, we're going to test out the get all courses and say call get all courses. That should return an array list of courses that I just used the get name on. And so now we only have 2 courses in there. Actually, I can quickly add some more data here so we have multiple categories. And let's see, what do we have an error on? Get rid of okay, so I'll run that. So basically here, that's all I did was add another category of LotusScript to the XPages that I had, and I'm still using the get all courses. So this should show me all 4 courses that I have now, even though they're in different categories. So just something that's going to be useful later on. Okay, so let me, since we're kind of running out of time, let me go to a completed version of this and just point out one key thing, because I still haven't built my type table. But that's very similar to what we just did with the category table. So if we look over in the outline on the right side, the outline is very useful. You see that this is basically what I've done so far, but I added a type table, which has a t-table variable. It's a linked hash map that we store our types in. And I added some gets and add types and things like that, very similar. But what I want to really point out most importantly is that at the bean level, so we had these objects, these type table, category table, courses list, course. But what I really wanted to do was to make it easy, add the methods that you see here, get types, which will go through and get all the types in my Java bean. So this go to a type table and get all the types using the get key set or the key set. The get categories is similar to what I just showed you, but this will do it. It'll walk through all the types and show me a string of all the categories. This one we in a type. So I pass in the admin or developer. It'll show me all the categories. And then what else? Oh, get all courses will show all the courses. So this will just loop through and get all the courses, regardless of what type or category they are, and return those as an array list, or in this case, just a list, which is above an array list. The array list is descended from that. Or I can say get all courses by type, pass it in admin or developer. It will again return a list of my courses, and get all courses by category. I pass it in a type and a category, and it returns all the courses, again, a list of all the courses. So that's actually the way my bean is going to interface with my XPage, is these methods here, these 1, 2, 5 methods that I have. So when I'm going to declare a new catalog bean, we'll instantiate it with some data. In this case, I had some more fake data in here. And we instantiated the data, and now all the data is present in our bean, and we can use any of these methods to get to that data. So we're kind of at that point now where we want to, let me see if I turn this off, where we want to pull it into an XPage and try it out on an XPage. So as I mentioned before, managed beans in XPages, we use the faces config XML file, and we choose a scope for that. So the scope is going to be like your variables, application scope, session scope. Application scopes for all users. They share the same variable or Java bean in this case. Session scope is unique for a user and lasts for the length of the session. View scope is for that user for as long as that XPage is active, and then request scope is only during the initial request. So we're going to choose a scope for our bean, and then we're going to initialize our values of the bean. So in my case, I'm initializing the values in the constructor in the bean, but remember you can't pass any arguments to the bean. So that works in my case because I know that's all I'm doing is going to a Domino view and loading up data. If you actually have to set values in the bean, you're going to want to use a setter. Or another way is you can have something called manage properties in the faces config file. The nice thing is if you have something like an application scope and you change your bean code, it can detect that your code changed and it'll reload the bean for you automatically, which is nice. You don't have to reload the Domino HTTP task. This is what we're going to put in the faces config file. Let me just show you that in Designer. So I'm going to switch back to our XPages perspective and start working with a Domino database again. So I have my demo database. This will make available to you guys. And under application configuration is my faces config file. If you don't have Domino 9, it might even be 9.01 when they surface the faces config under application configuration. You're only going to see this in the XPages perspective, not in the Domino Designer perspective. But you can go to Package Explorer and go to Web Content, Web INF. You'll see your faces config XML file. So that, if you have 8.5 or any version, that will always work by going to the Package Explorer. Here's my managed bean. I gave it a description. I gave it a name. This name is how we're going to reference the bean in our XPage. I gave it the class. So the class here, I put all my code. So I just basically copy and pasted my code, very high tech, from what I was experimenting with as a Java application. I put it all into my Java design element here, and you see, actually I don't want to go full screen, you see in the outline here, let me move that to the left. You see that in my outline. It's very similar to what we were building before. I have my course object, my different tables, and then I have my methods I use to get courses. I ended up having to create one to help when I was initializing the data. And then I initialize the data in a method, going to a view and walking through the view one by one. I'm not going to go through that detail because your situation will be different. And that was basically my bean. So I have my Java bean. Then I made a managed bean by putting it into the faces config file. So now the next thing we need to do is access that bean to be able to display the data in our XPages. How are we going to do that? Well, it depends on if you're using server-side JavaScript or not, the not being the expression language. So first we'll talk about server-side JavaScript. So my bean before was catalog bean. So I can say catalog bean.get types, and as the example here, and that will return a list of all the types. And that's accessing the bean that way. If I want to pass in parameters, I can do that. So I can pass in a parameter to the bean, to my get call or my set call, and it will return whatever it's supposed to return. Ideally, if you are just using a getter to get a simple property, you want to use the expression language. This will work a lot faster than using the server-side JavaScript. So here it's a little tricky in that we'll have the bean name, but then we won't use a get in front of it or an is. We'll just say the bean name dot property name. So in the example before, my my method was get types. So what I want to show would just be catalog bean, the name of the bean, dot types. Here's another tricky thing is that even though my Java code was get types with a capital T, I'm going to use a lowercase t for that initial character. The thing with the expression language is you do not have a way to pass in parameters. So you don't supply the parentheses, of course, and there's no way to pass in a parameter. So you can't use this whenever you got to pass in a parameter. That's when you'll have to use the server-side JavaScript way. So let's go back to our XPage and look at the completed XPage and see how this was used. So again, you're going to get this database. There's one XPage in it. So for the audience, let me, before I do anything, let me just show the completed XPage here, just so you get an idea of what's happening. And it looks a little different than my catalog at my website just because I used a different, this is still loading, just because I used a different, I used Bootstrap and I took out some of the other things that we had at TLCC website that would just make things complicated. For you guys, when you're use the target audience and it'll change admin or developer or both. And as you do that, the topics, the categories change. And you see, probably hard to tell over GoToWebinar, but it works fairly quickly when I move things, change different selections on the left side. So going back to the XPage, on the left side for my, this is a radio button, obviously with the admin developer choice. I hard-coded in both, but I use the expression language and just have my bean name, catalog bean, dot types to get the different types. Remember, types was admin or developer. Then if I want to choose a category, here we have a combo box, and here I use the server. First I figure out what type the user selected, if they picked admin or developer, because then I call my bean, catalog bean, get categories, and I pass in whatever value the user selected, whether it's admin, developer, or both. So that will show all the categories for whatever developer or admin that they wanted. So then we have the repeat control. So the repeat control before was very complicated. I made it a lot less complicated because we just get what the user chose on the left side. So if they chose a category or chose a type, if they chose neither, we just say catalog bean.get all courses. If they only chose a admin or developer, or then we just say get all courses by type and pass in the type. And so remember that returns an array list of courses. We'll see how that's used in a second. Or I can say get all courses by category and give it the type and the category. Then in my repeat, for example, the label for my link, which is actually the course name, here I use the expression language. Collection was the repeat variable, and it's repeating over an array list of courses. So, the method was get CNAME, so I just say collection.CNAME because I'm using the expression language. But if I go to the price, for example, here I use the Server Side JavaScript, and I use the collection.getPrice to get the price. The reason I use server-side JavaScript here is because I wanted to then format the price so it just has some nice currency symbol and no decimal places. Also, I did extend it a little bit beyond what we talked about. If it's a free course, we don't put up a price, we just say it's free. And that's for our demo courses. So that's how I use it. So you see that my implementation, because I went to the bean's doing all the work of figuring out what to display. We just call it the bean and then go from there. So why'd we do this? Performance. On the initial access before, I was at 1.3 seconds. Now I'm at 600 milliseconds, just using very unscientific, using Firebug. And doing it a couple times and averaging it together. Before, when I changed the versions, it was 657 milliseconds. Now it's a third of that. If I change categories, it's about a third of my old version before I had my bean. So it's definitely quicker there. Another way to look at this is using the XPages toolbox to profile calls to my Domino backend objects. Before, when I changed versions, and went from, let's say, R9 to R8.5, we had 2,800 calls to my Domino backend objects. That took 188 milliseconds. Now, with the bean, I should have theoretically 0, but because I had that @ function I was using in my repeat, which is something I didn't notice before, that actually is making calls to my Domino backend objects. And it made 146 calls. So basically it went down to almost 0. It's taking 0 milliseconds, but it's still calling some Domino backend objects just because I had that @ text in there. So it was basically kind of my journey, I guess you could say, and we could also say I think we roasted this bean well done today. We have time for some questions. I'll turn it over to Paul, who can talk a little bit about how to ask a question and also go over the deal we have if you want to learn more about Java on our Java courses. So, Paul?
Thank you, Howard. That was very informative and did receive a lot of comments in the question area that it was very informative. Just as a reminder, on this slide here, we have that sale until March 15th for both our Java 1 and Java 2 courses, and they're both on sale and available in a package. Howard, can you go to the next slide? Many of you are already asking questions. Ask your questions, post them in the questions pane, and I'll give them a voice in a moment. And if you can't see it, just click on that little orange arrow in the ribbon to access your questions pane. And next slide, Howard. Okay, so there are a few questions. I don't know if you want to comment on the upcoming events. Courtney already described Engage, but maybe you can comment on NTwickler. You've been to that one,
Sure,
Howard.
NWICR, my friend Rudy, puts on a conference in Germany. He's done this for many, many years. It's a paid event, but he has some great speakers, and it's primarily for German speakers. So anyone dialing in today from Germany, you might want to check that out. It's happening in a couple weeks. And then if you are in Europe or want to go to Europe, Theo is having his Engage conference again, which used to be the Belgium user group. And Theo does an excellent job. This is free, 2-day event. Some of the best speakers in the community are going there. And again, is a beautiful city. We actually went there after one of the previous Engages as sightseeing, and it's if you haven't been there, definitely worth figuring out a way to get there. I realize it's a little hard for us people in the U.S., but if you're in Europe, it's a free conference with great speakers. Definitely want to try to attend. And so we're ready for questions, Paul.
Okay, I have a question from David. Wondering, why you're putting the classes inside the bean as opposed to creating separate Java classes.
Good question. Basically, all those classes that I created, the category table, the courses list, those are really used internally. And so at the end, I showed just those methods that we had defined at the bean level that does the work of accessing all those. So if I put them individually, first of all, I would have had multiple Java beans. And not only that, I also should say that, let's say, for example, the courses list. That's not one instantiation of the courses list. I have each category of all our courses has its own list of courses that I put into a category entry in the categories table, and then the categories table gets stuffed in the type table. So these kind of all relate, and classes are stored, or I should say objects are stored within other objects. So we really just have one type table, and that one type table has multiple types, and then each type has multiple categories, and then each category has the value of that is our list of courses, which of course is points to the course. So we really hide all that complexity, and having those methods at the bean level. So you just say, get me all courses in the XPages category, and it just returns an array list of those courses.
Okay. Brian asked, and I can answer this. He's asking if the slides and the demo database is going to be available. Yes, it is going to be available. Howard's mentioned this, but if you missed it, you'll receive a follow-up email. All the attendees will receive a follow-up email with links to the slides, the recording of the webinar, and the demo database as well. That's correct, right, Howard?
Yes, we're going to make the demo database available, and then as well as a link to the recording and the slides. Okay,
so question from Keith. You've showed us the managed bean. How about an unmanaged bean? So how would you, if you don't have the need for that managed bean in any scope, how would you access the Java bean?
What you would want to do is you would first, in your server, presumably from Server Side JavaScript, so there's an @import that you can use in your Server Side JavaScript, and you would say or is it @import package, Paul? I forget. I think it's @import package.
Yes.
And you would just say com.tlcc.catalog bean. And then once you did that, you would then have to declare, kind of like I did with the main program, where I had to declare a new instance of the catalog bean. So you'd have to say var, cbean is equal to new catalog bean, and then set whatever values you need, and then you could use that within your code. But then once your code is finished executing, that object would go away. So that's the benefit of the managed bean, is the object stays for whatever scope that you had defined, and you don't have to declare it. It's declared automatically when that XPage is loaded or in the case of an application scope, when that application's loaded.
Okay, so I've got a question from Brian, and what if there's a need for CRUD operations? So what if your data is more dynamic and you're adding courses on the fly? How do you reload the bean?
Okay, well, yeah, adding courses you could definitely do, and you could just have another method, add a course and have it add to the right various tables that I had. So to reload the bean, you would have to basically you wouldn't have to reload the bean because your data is all there. In the case of what I was doing was application scope. Data is all there in memory, all our courses. We just added one. So the only thing you really have to do is refresh your XPage so it would show the new course. Now, in terms of CRUD, I mean, if you were working with more data that, it's a lot of, some people, I should say, some of the bloggers have talked about where they create a managed bean that will control access to your data. So the managed bean is actually what's interfacing with the Domino document, and when a user asks for a certain document, it loads it from the Domino database, and then if they make changes or create a new one, it does, the validation happens in the bean, and if it doesn't pass validation, the bean will say this didn't pass and pass back an error to be handled on the XPage. Or if you want to write that information out to the Domino application, the bean would actually be what's doing the saving. So that's a technique that some of the the folks in the blogging community have done, and they've actually people have written some controller classes to do that. But obviously in my case is kind of more a read-only kind of thing.
Okay, quick question from Ovi. Will we be covering how to write a REST web service in Java in a future webinar? Howard, do you have any plans?
Well, I guess I should ask that of you, Paul, because you and Oliver are going to be working with some constructs that require data in a REST service. I think Oliver, in the description, said he was going to briefly talk about that, creating a REST service in Java. And Paul, I don't know if you were going to talk about it or not.
Well, not specifically in a Java class. But we will be taking a look at a REST service example when I take a look at the Dojo data grid. Yeah,
so I do believe we'll touch on that a little bit in the March webinar. However, the intent of that session is more on the presentation using these two different, like you said, Paul, the two different alternatives to using a view control.
Okay, how many more you want here, Howard? We've got a few questions lined up.
We take one or two more.
Okay, question from Gail. That serialization number that you set to 1L in your Java bean, does that have to be different for every managed bean?
There is a way to generate kind of a random number, and I'm not quite sure of the rules. I think it's really is only going to matter if you have the same, like if you have something that's a bean that's session scope and it's for each user, it's not going to matter because each user is running their code and it's kind of their own little sandbox, if you want to say that. So I don't think that's really going to come into play, but there is a way when you generate that, instead of using the default, to generate kind of like more of a random number.
Okay, question from Slobodan. Is it okay to pass Domino objects into methods of a Java bean or instantiate and recycle in the scope of the method, not declaring them as properties but using them right directly in the methods?
Well, yeah, there's not a problem. Let's say if you, let's say in my instance, I said, okay, I wanted to get more information about a certain course and pass that back. So I could say, get course whatever, pass it a course code, and in my bean I could then go to my Domino database, pull up that document, get the information, pass it back, and then recycle that Domino document. So yeah, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I wouldn't want to take that Domino document and store it in a variable in my bean where I'm thinking it's going to persist, because it's not going to persist if it gets serialized to disk.
Okay, another question from Slobodan. Can we reuse existing Java classes used by agents, or do we have to recreate or duplicate these for XPages applications?
You can't use them from script libraries. What you could do is move that code to a jar file and then import in the jar file into your agent, or import it into your XPages. And actually for XPages there is a jar design element that you could bring them in. For your agents you'd have to bring them in individually. So that would be about the only way to do it, I think.
Okay, and one more question. What's the best pattern to get the note session object into a Java bean or a managed bean?
There is a faces some sort of context.get session. I forget what it is, but you probably can find it on the web. But there is a way to do that, and I think that in Domino 9 there's something that came in from the extension library that makes it even easier to do that. So you probably just Google that. But that brings up another point I wanted to make, and I forgot. When I was working with the Java program, not in my Domino application, but when it was a Java program and I was just experimenting, there is a way in a Java program, there's a couple different ways to access a Domino database. So even though I was using just fake data, you can access your, basically get a session object in your Java program. So I wanted to mention that, because if you do take my approach and do some prototyping or experimentation in a Java program, you are not, there is no restriction that you can't access your Domino data. And again, you can Google that. That just goes back to like R5 days. They've had a couple different ways of doing that, and you should be able to quickly find, some of the different ways. And it depends whether you're accessing it on a server or on your local machine. On your local machine is a lot easier. And when you do a server, then you just got to call out using a remote procedure call to the server. But it's all pretty easy, and as I said, it's kind of makes it easier to prototype when you're working in that environment versus linking to an XPage and creating a managed bean and that sort of thing.
Okay, Howard, I think that is all the time we have. So I'd like to pass on my thanks for everyone for attending, and be sure to catch our next webinar on March 17th.
Okay, thank you everyone for attending, and have a great rest.